It was awesome. I mean, I've been, having some one-on-one conversations with him about just letting the game come to you, right? I think that one thing that people don't really think about at times is when you go to a new place, it takes a little time sometimes, especially when he wasn't necessarily involved in the stuff we were doing in the summer. And so it takes a little more time than you think to feel comfortable and to end up playing instinctively like you can. And so, that what I saw Saturday with him breaking tackles and being hard to tackle and just being big and hard to tackle, right? Playing with a high level of confidence is what Sam can do. That's his potential.
The thing back at the beginning of the season that you don't want one 100-yard guy, but you love 650-yard, 50-catch guys. The fact that you have four of them, the four receivers it seems like there is a good distribution. Obviously, X is X, but everybody is getting an opportunity, taking advantage of it. Just how much does that help in terms of game planning and scheming when you do have so many options that for the defense has to face?
Yeah, I think it helps in two ways. One is you can keep people fresh through the course of the game. And so at the end of the game, guys are running at top speed, playing 100%. But ultimately, the defense can't focus on one guy, So I just like distribution. I like the ball being distributed around. Ultimately, there's going to be years where it's lopsided. That's just the way it is. I mean, I don't dictate where the ball is thrown. I mean, that's really up to the quarterback, unless it's like a screen or something, So in the pass game, the ball goes to where the flow of the defense allows it to go. So, it's good to see the ball get distributed around. I like that. I think that's tougher for the defense to defend.
What they do, well, I shouldn't ask what they did, but tight ends I didn't think you had a target.
They had some, it's like everything. I mean, they're in every route, and they were open some. We missed them a few times. I mean, Elijah had some space on a couple of them, but the ball went somewhere else, and so that's going to happen. It's going to happen sometimes. I mean, there's going to be days where they catch 6, 7, 8 balls and days where they don't catch any. And the key is to find ways to affect the game without, which they do, And so I thought one of the biggest plays in the game is when he threw it to Elijah on the seam route and Elijah broke it up, saved a pick. That was a huge play, in my opinion, in the game. And that was awesome because ultimately when you do make bad decisions and the ball's up and the defense has the priority on it and the position on it, right, you got to become a defender and just do whatever it takes to maintain possession of the ball. And I thought that play really was a reflection of how that kid's played all year, doing the dirty work and just like effort, right? And, that was awesome because that saved the drive.
Since you got here, I guess what'd you learn last year from this rivalry that maybe you didn't know about how this one might be a little different than those rivalries?
Well, it's epic, right? I mean, look, I grew up in the South. I watched this game from afar every year. And so those two logos being on the field, I mean, it is what it is. I don't think there's much that needs to be said about how they feel about us and we feel about them. I think, Coach Cristobal probably alluded to the fact that when teams with this level of rivalry play, the records really don't mean anything. We know it's going to be a dogfight. We know we're going to get their best. I mean, heck, we get everybody's best, right? I mean, everybody's kind of shooting for us, and we're fine with that. And we got to keep focusing on the future. In my opinion, is the key. And they're probably telling their guys the same thing: focus on the future, because no matter what happened the last 7 weeks, it really has nothing to do with this week. It really doesn't. Like, you look across the nation, and statistically 50% of the teams are going to win and 50% of the teams are going to lose every weekend, right? And so we're just trying to stay on that other 50%. But, the way that odds are set up and everything don't always match the way the game plays out. It just doesn't.
Is it worth going back and looking at last year's games because you guys have so much personnel difference? They have obviously complete personnel difference, it seems like.
I did. I think schematically it's worth watching. I think schematically all those games are worth watching from last year and this year because coaches are creatures of habit, right? And so trying to get beads on why they do certain things versus certain offenses and why they did certain things versus us last year and trying to figure out like some tendency breaker deals that you might have, led up to that game is crucial. So yeah, absolutely. I think watching those games, even though it's not exactly the same people, I think watching them is vital to the game plan.
There are a few staff members, obviously, who went to UM. Coach Cristobal, obviously, Kevin Beard, a few other staffers who went to UM. You ever catch them like when you're talking to them about FSU? They're just like, I hate the staff, like, just like under their breath.
Well, you ask them that, I mean, I wasn't fortunate enough to be talented enough to play at a place like this, so you have to ask those guys that. I'm blessed to be here now, and so I feel the same way they do because we're all wearing the same logo.
And then a few times on Saturday, you guys shifted Jalen Rivers inside and Markel playing left tackle. So what do you guys like about that lineup?
I just think Markel has shown we trust him, and so we have a handful of players that might not be starters, but we trust. And so those guys deserve playing time. They deserve to be out there. And ultimately you have to trust them, right? That's first. And then you got to put them out there and let them play. So I just think that rewarding guys that have shown that is very important. And there's look, across the board at every position is really the same. I mean, you look at AJ, for instance, I mean, he came in and gave us a huge spark at the end of the game. And so just keep playing, right? Keep practicing hard, keep playing, and when your number's called, take advantage of it, because that's the narrative that needs to be sent weekly, and it is. And so and our guys have bought into that, and our guys' attitude's been great about it. Some guys might not get the time that they think they should get, or people around them think they should get, but they know that it's more about we than me, right? It's more about the collective effort and trying to win the game than you getting yours. In our society, that's hard today. But ultimately, we have a group of guys that honestly have bought into the fact that no matter what happens on Saturday, if we go 1-0, then that is the most important thing, including number one. Like he's the leader of it, and so, I mean, he'll be the first to tell me coming off to the sideline that we're smashing them, keep running it, which is awesome. I love to hear that, right?
How's the development coming at quarterback? Obviously we don't get to see Emery and Reese and how are those guys developing on the practice field? And what do you see as the outlook for that position here as you get closer to December, where you've got to make some obvious decisions whether you have a starter for next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think spring's going to be vital for that, right? Spring and camp is where reps are distributed heavily, right? When you get into the season, the starting quarterback's going to take the majority of the reps, and then there's going to be a handful of reps to get the backup ready. And then really the third guy takes very minimal, and he has to have mental reps, right? Mental reps are very, very crucial when you're in the season, because not everybody's going to get those reps. So I do think those guys have taken advantage of their reps, and they prepare, and they must prepare like they're starting, right? They do. And they're in meetings, and they ask questions. They're in everything. They don't get the reps that Cam gets, obviously, because they're not the starter. And so, but this spring's going to be huge. I mean, competition in the spring, I mean, that's going to dictate how things go from there.
With A.J. Allen, obviously, having that confidence to put him into a game like that, when Martinez and, Mark having a big game like that, just talk about that decision and just the impact he had kind of being that change of speed back.
Coach Merritt, I mean, you got to give that guy a ton of credit, because I'm on the sideline and he comes up to me and he's just like, I think we need to put AJ in there. I think he's had a great week, and I think he's going to give us a spark. And I trust all those guys to handle their rotations. I don't really, I might say something a few times, but ultimately they play the people. That's their job. They're the head coach of their groups. And so when he came to me, I mean, I trusted him. We put him in there, and he did exactly what Coach said he was going to do. So, but AJ practices extremely hard every week. Guys made a lot of plays here, and so it's a testament to him that he stays positive. And then when his number's called, he goes out there, and I mean, he had 3 or 4 really huge plays for us.
That we're more than halfway through the regular season. Look at last game. Like, I think Damian got 13 carries and Mark had 12, maybe it was reversed. They both had under 15 carries. How important is it to keep that workload managed so that they're staying healthy? I know you guys want to go to play into December, into January. So managing that workload, how important is that?
I think in running back it's extremely important because that's a very, violent position. You got to do, I say that all the time with those guys, but I mean, their job description is heavy. They get hit at a lot of different angles than other players do. They have to take on blitzers, A gap, B gap. It's just like we need to spread out the damage in that group. And so I think that having a group of guys and having it more running back committee is vital towards the end of the year because you can stay healthy and God forbid, something happens, then somebody's ready. Somebody's got a lot of reps and they're ready, right?
How much have they embraced that? I know you talked about a little bit of like, I think Murray talked about like them all being happy with like their role. How much have they embraced the fact that they may not be getting 25 carries a game, but they are staying healthy?
I mean, you'd have to ask them that. I mean, their attitude's been awesome from my vantage point. I do preach that a lot, to be quite honest with you, because I know how our rooms are built, and they're going to keep being built that way. So I think it's vitally important to keep attitude first, keep team first, and keep me, in check a little bit, right? And so, everybody's attitude on a daily basis in that group and really in all the groups have been really, really positive. And so we haven't had any issues with that. And I think that, honestly, they enjoy seeing the other guy make plays. They appreciate that. And they all celebrate together and, it's the same way across the board, which is really good to see.
Those lines, kind of along those lines, we've all seen that Xavier's obviously having an unbelievable year on the field, and he's always had leadership qualities. Just where's his, from what we don't see in practice and behind the scenes, just where's that leadership level with him grown in the year and a half that you've been with him?
Well, I mean, I think I've said about all you could say about him as far as his work ethic and grit. I do think, when things are tight, people depend on him and he comes through. I think when you keep doing that time and time again, obviously your status on the team is high. But he's also, I do think one thing that he does really well is when he doesn't get the ball. And I really do. I mean, I think he runs routes he strains in every route, right? And when we ask that dude to come in and block. You see him, he's motioning in, he's blocking safeties, he's blocking Sam linebackers. I mean, and he takes pride in that too. And so if he didn't do those things, the status would probably be a little different. But people see him doing everything, not just catching the ball 6 or 7 times or whatever, or making a big play, but he does all the gritty stuff too. And so if you look at everything, I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons why he's a special player, because it isn't about when you have the ball in your hand, in my opinion. It's about all those other things you do without the ball in your hand.
You haven't been within his whole career, obviously, but do you still see that, the cliche chip on the shoulder and then too small, too slow, too this, too that, and he has outkicked many of his rankings over the years?
Well, I mean, typically guys like that never lose that chip. They just don't. I mean, I think in 10 years he's going to have that chip on his shoulder because people play like Aaron Rodgers has that chip on his shoulder. Like guys like Baker Mayfield because they didn't get recruited, right? Cam Ward, I mean, those things at that point in time in your life when you're 17 or 18 years old and your whole life you've played a sport and people look at you a certain way, you never forget that. That time in your life is just, it's because it's the next step. You're going from high school and it's like into the unknown a little bit. Everybody wants to know and feel good. And then when people look at you in a way that is a little bit different than the way you look at yourself, you don't forget that. And I think that's probably one of the times in your life that probably sticks with you the longest, that little bit of divide right there from high school to college. And so he'll never lose that. And that's part of, like, he don't need to lose it, to be honest with you. He does not need to lose that because that's what makes him him.
You guys are top 10 in the country in a lot of stats, including points per game, obviously, which is the whole point. But I'm curious if there's a stat outside of points per game that you're particularly pleased with or impressed with that you guys have achieved this year.
Yeah, I like the fact that our yards per play is high because, I mean, that's, we've made an emphasis to be explosive. And so our yards per play is high, our total number of punts are low, and our third down is high. So that's probably three that dictate you being on the field longer. And so yards per play is huge. I think, that one is very telling of an offense. But the other two are telling of, like, keeping the ball on your side.
You guys are right now converting slightly over 60% of third downs, and I just did a quick look on CFB stats, and no team's done that for at least since 2016. Just what's been working so well on third down for you guys? How much of it is just setting yourselves up well? How much of it is scheme and play calling and performance? And I guess what's worked so well?
Well, it's not all scheme and play calling. I can tell you that to answer that easily, because ultimately, if you have, let's say you have 15 third downs in a game, you don't always have that many, but what makes Cam special is he picks them up when we get covered. Really that's what you need to happen on third down, because defenses spend a lot of time being exotic on third down, and like the run-pass ratio on third down's always skewed, meaning they know when you're going to throw it and they kind of know when you're going to run it. And you want to break those tendencies, which we did a couple times in the game and got them on 3rd and 6 and 3rd and 5. They did it a couple times to us too, and so when you break those tendencies, it kind of shows up. But ultimately, when it isn't there, what happens? And I think that's vital to third down stats. It'd be interesting to go back and kind of see that percentage, based on, okay, did the play map out perfectly, and like sometimes Restrepo or somebody's wide open and we hit it, right? And then sometimes nobody's open and we got to scramble and get the first down. And so that's probably the reason the third downs are higher, is because of the ability to extend plays, and when it's not there, to go get it, because ultimately, I don't know if like this is completely obvious, but third down's the last play. And so you need to treat it as such. And so if you don't convert it, you don't get to play anymore. And so it needs to be a heightened sense of everything.
Is it still the last play?
No, sometimes that's a good point. It's a good point. And so sometimes it's not the last play. And one of the greatest quotes ever was, Leach was asked one time why he went for it so much on 4th down. Do you know what he said? He said to overcome the disappointment of not getting it on 3rd down. So it's typically what happens, is like you get, you don't get it and you're frustrated and you go for it. Well, the times we went for it were more like 4th and short, and like a couple of them backed up. I thought Coach Cristobal, made a couple really aggressive, good calls to go for it when our team desperately needed it.
I know you said, but you don't see that very often, except this year it seems like you see it more and more and more. Teams aren't afraid of going for it on 4th down on their side of the field. Is that just where the game is? Because you got to score a bunch?
And I think that part of it might be that. It's the flow of the game matters. How both teams are doing offensively, I think you factor that in. I do think, looking at statistically, 4th and 1, you should get, right? Like, I know you don't get it all the time, but like it's right there, right? So if you look at teams that historically have went for more 4th downs, have been like the academies, the option teams. Well, heck, if it's 4th and 1 or 2, they're going for it, because ultimately the way they play football, they're going to get 1 or 2 yards, and they're going to keep everything rolling. So I think people have kind of looked at them through the years and been like, all right, well, if we have a good scheme and we feel good about it, then 4th and 1 should be an aggressive call wherever, right? Unless it's just a situation in the game where it's like you can't do it, or like, both offenses are stalling out, and like, that the flow of the game is going to dictate some of those decisions too. And I don't you have to ask Coach Cristobal that too. I mean, he's like, he either gives me the, thumbs up or thumbs down.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Coach.